Good evening. My name is Kathy Keck. I'm the interim head of communications for Bayer in Berkeley and biotech. And welcome to our neighbors in the Berkeley community for this evening's program. This presentation is about Bayer's Berkeley Cell and Gene Therapy Production Facility. So let me tell you a little bit about what this meeting is designed to do and what it's designed not to do. So today's meeting is totally focused on a new building. And this building is the Cell and Gene Therapy Production Center. And this building is being proposed under the existing development agreement between the city of Berkeley and Bayer. So what this meeting is not about is Bayer's application to extend the development agreement that we have. Our next community meeting about the extension application may be in February. We're still working out the details on timing for our next meeting. And you can always sign up for updates by emailing us at communications.berkeley@bayer.com or checking bayer.com/Berkeley for the latest news on meetings that are coming up. And again, this is associated with a application that Bayer has submitted to the city for a specific building under the development agreement. Next slide, please. So, as we're all working virtually and communicating with friends and family virtually, it's still a little bit challenging when we all get into different technologies. So first and foremost, I want to be honest and tell you we're recording this meeting. It's our way to capture your questions and your feedback. We're going to cover a lot of information. We plan to answer questions and share your comments at the end. Our Q&A will be divided in a couple of parts. We will do a live Q&A for about 15 minutes, and we'll call upon individuals who've raised their hands. And you can find the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. Now you might have to run your cursor or your mouse over the bottom of the screen so that will pop up for you. Please put your questions into the box, into the two icons that you see that are marked Q&A. There is a chat feature as well, and if you only have comments, please put those in the chat. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. Because what I don't want to do is miss a question because I'm reading through chats. And we'll switch to those written Q&A once we've done the verbal Q&A session. And if we've not gotten to all of the questions today before our meeting ends, we'll follow up with those individuals in the next 7 to 10 days. Next slide, please. So, without further ado, I'll stop with the introductory information. But I will be very pleased to introduce to you Jens Vogel. Jens is the Senior Vice President and Global Head of Biotech Product Supply, and he's the head of the Berkeley site. Pleased to have him here today, and he's going to tell you a little bit about Bayer in Berkeley and about cell and gene therapies. Jens?
Thank you very much, Cassie, and a very, very warm welcome also from my side to all of you to our community meeting here today on the Cell and Gene Therapy building. I just wanted to start really telling you a little bit about Bayer and what we really do in Berkeley. Now, for many, many decades, Berkeley has really been the global headquarters of our biologics unit. What we really focus on is, on one hand, developing new therapies for patients in need. And on the other hand, really, it's our commercial manufacturing center. And we basically produce right now 3 drugs for treating hemophilia in Berkeley, Cogenate, Kovaltry, and GV, and we've been doing that for many, many years, and we are supplying 50 countries worldwide with these really important life-saving medicines. And what you can see here is this is a picture that we took actually for World Hemophilia Day. On the right, you see one of our patients. His name is Evan Kerstetter. And I had the pleasure to virtually meet him on World Hemophilia Day. He's a really, really great person. He's actually training as a nurse and basically working in the hospital every day all throughout this pandemic. And so are our folks, because all throughout the pandemic, we had to make sure that we continue the supply of these medicines, because hemophiliacs, as you probably know, totally depend on these therapies in order to survive ultimately and live a healthy life. So this is something that we are very, very proud of, and something, a tradition that we want to build on. We want to basically develop and manufacture new therapies, and especially now go into cell and gene therapies, which are really poised to revolutionize medicine. And if you go to the next slide, um, please. So why do cell and gene therapies matter? So this is something that is still relatively new, because when you look at products like the hemophilia therapies that we are making, those are protein therapies. Many diseases are really caused so by specific gene defects. And actually hemophilia is a really good example of that, because hemophiliacs have a mutation in the factor VIII gene, which is really there to produce factor VIII, a blood coagulation factor. And without that intact factor VIII, if you cut yourself, you don't stop bleeding. Now, gene therapy really basically works by inserting the actual healthy gene into the patient, so that the patient, him or herself, can actually make the correct protein. And so basically it allows you to potentially really cure the disease rather than just treat the disease or modify the disease. Other diseases are caused by cell damage, and so that plays a role, for example, in Parkinson's, where dopaminergic neurons, so basically brain cells that are producing a chemical called dopamine, start to degrade and die. And our approach there is to really create cell therapies where you take cells and insert them into the patient, so that basically you can truly regenerate the brain and potentially cure the disease again. So previously, most treatments were really limited to alleviating symptoms, or, like I said, modifying a disease. And cell and gene therapies may really shift this paradigm. And that's the first chance we have in history to perhaps really cure some of these diseases that patients suffer from. Next slide. And here is basically just another chart that outlines that the gene therapy really works by delivering the intact gene into the patient cells, and therefore basically repairing the cells. And certainly in the ideal case with monogenetic diseases, you might be able to really cure the patients, so that they don't really have to take a drug for the rest of their lives. In the ideal case, that's the vision. That's what we're trying to achieve. Next slide. In cell therapy, again, there are many different types of cell therapies, but ultimately they all have in common that that basically you are delivering functioning cells, healthy functional cells, into a patient's body to achieve a therapeutic effect. So they are regenerative cell therapies that we are working on, and there are also cell therapies that, for example, immunocell therapies that could be used to treat cancer. There are definitely two overall types. I mean, there's the autologous cell therapy. So when you read right now about the first generation products that are coming out for cancer therapy, which have really stunning response rates that we've never seen before in medicine, in some cases 80 to 90% response rates in patients. Those are autologous cell therapies. So how these work is that you basically take cells from an individual patient, you modify them in culture, and then you reinfuse them into the patient's body. Now, that is a very, very lengthy process. So that takes several months to produce that therapy from one individual patient. And as you can imagine, it's basically not only difficult, but impossible to really do that on a large scale to treat the many, many patients that are out there, because it just takes too long and it's just too intensive, and there are a lot of things that can actually go wrong in these. So what we are focusing on is the next generation of cell therapies, which are called allogeneic cell therapies, where you basically take cells from usually a healthy donor, you modify them, create a universal cell bank that you can then use to treat many, many patients in need. Next slide. So ultimately, that is what we really want to do here in Berkeley. And you know, we have, and you've probably seen that from the press, we are working with innovation centers like Blue Rock, that is working on Parkinson's disease. We are working with other partners like Atara on cancer therapies, and also with Blue Rock on heart disease, which is something that you know, is really, really crucial, and might again revolutionize treatment, because, as you know, when patients have a heart attack, and even if they survive, oftentimes their hearts are damaged. So what we are trying to do is basically use pluripotent stem cells, induce pluripotent stem cells, to differentiate and grow healthy heart cells, which we could then implant into a patient's heart and literally mend that damaged heart. And so all these therapies are why we work so hard, and what we want to manufacture ultimately here in Berkeley in this new cell and gene therapy manufacturing facility. And with that, I would like to hand over to Drew Johnston.
Thank you, Jens. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you, Jens, for setting up the business case and what we're really trying to do here, and to support all of our patients. So my name is Drew Johnston. I am responsible for engineering in Berkeley, and I want to walk everybody through the facility we plan to build. So maybe next slide. So as Kathy started the meeting, just to be clear on what we're talking about and what we're not, we have an existing development agreement that was signed in 1992 and expires in 2022. This facility we're talking about now is covered under our existing agreement. Next slide, please. So this is a site plan of our Berkeley site. North is up on the drawing. You can see the Dwight Way there in Grayson. 7th Street borders us to the east, and the railroad tracks in the bay border us to the west. We have a manufacturing corridor on the west side of our site, where it currently has multiple facilities for hemophilia products. We have a cell culture technology center, which is a protein therapeutics facility that is currently under construction and starting with the startup. And you can see just north of it is where we're proposing our cell and gene therapy facility. And next slide, please. So a little specifics on our DA, our development agreement. That agreement provides multiple zones on site to build certain types of facilities under certain requirements. It's color coded here for convenience. You can see we've circled, if you go back one, please. We've circled the cell and gene therapy production facility. There you can see it again, it's just north of our cell culture technology center, and it's located in a manufacturing zone. So compliant with our current agreement. Next slide, please. So just kind of taking a look at the project and the parameters. It's roughly 100,000 square foot facility. It's a mixed manufacturing facility. We plan that it'll be 3 floors, which will accommodate 2 production suites with a mechanical space in between them, serving them both. Have a small penthouse for mainly air handling. Complies with all of our development agreement requirements, and it's also, this facility will run 24/7 in the way we plan to operate it. We hope to have the facility, its main shell, up by the end of next year and going into this. So we do take sustainability as a company very serious. So all of our facilities do have sustainable aspects, whether it's how we retain water in the courtyard, allow bike parking, bird safe class. We do go through the LEED certification process on all of our facilities, and we also make sure that from a power consumption that they're renewable ready, and we do comply with the gas ban in Berkeley. Okay, next slide. Okay, so like I mentioned, this is a three-story facility. The breakout you see on the left-hand side of the slide, that is the kind of blow-up of the facility. Those blue boxes would be our manufacturing modules, and the big gray box would be our mechanical space that sits in between them. A little bit more, probably best to go to the next slide. So those blue boxes are important because they are a standard size. Our current cell culture technology center has basically the same blue box in the middle of it, and it is configured for protein therapeutics. That blue box can also be configured to handle cell therapy and gene therapy. You can see those two blue boxes there, and one configured for cell therapy, one for gene therapy. The highlights of the colors are the different types of space that we need for the different equipment for the unit operations to manufacture the medicine. So I won't go into the details, but each suite goes through a process to culture the cells, separate the cells, clean the cells, and then package. And those operations all happen, but you can see that we build them in a standard format, which allows us to build this facility, have a production box, and then as the medicines move through their development and trials, we can configure and build out the space to meet the needs of those products. Next slide. So one of the things I'm sure everybody's wondering is what it's going to look like if you're off campus. So this picture is taken, and there's two here, and there's also a key plan for those who can see it. So if you came down Carlton Street, past the Foundry, and hit the gate where Carlton goes from a public road to onto the bare campus, and you look through that gate, this is what you would see. You can see the facility there in the large picture, and the small picture on the left, you can see what it looks like today. A lot of excavators. So next slide. If you're in an aquatic park, which is probably a more likely vantage point, and you're looking east towards our campus, the smaller picture again on the left is a picture taken about 6 weeks ago, and then you can see a small facility there, and then in the larger picture you can see the facility we're proposing sticking up above in the trees there. Next slide. Go same photo setup. We're also in Aquatic Park. This one we're looking northeast. You can see the facility through the trees there. You can also see our current cell culture technology center also through the trees, but more on the right side of this slide. Okay, next slide. So landscaping and green space are also very important. There's quite a bit of detail on this slide, I would say, but the takeaway is we live in a beautiful area where a lot of different styles of plants grow, and those are the ones that we plant. So we plant them, we get them going, and then they take it from there. So drought tolerant, local, fair. Next slide. Okay, so then if you're on our campus, here's some pictures about how it would look. If you're so moving clockwise, starting in the top left, That's a picture taken from our current cell culture technology center under construction, looking northeast. So you can see the facility with no windows, and then the facility with windows. The facility with windows is the one we're building. Again, moving clockwise, that's a photo of between the two facilities looking east, so out towards the Berkeley Hills. Drop down one, that's a picture from 4th Street if you're on our campus, looking south towards Grayson Street. And then finishing off with the bottom left, that is a view, again, between the two facilities looking out towards the bay. Next slide. Looking northeast, so if you were in a drone above the aquatic park, actually you'd be above the railroad tracks, looking northeast at the facility. That's what you would see. So you can see the step backs in the facility to comply with our agreement and limit the massing on our perimeter. Next slide. I believe this might be my last one. So this is just an aerial view looking due west. The bay would be behind the facilities here, and you can see our current Cell Culture Technology Center, again, the one that's finishing up, and then this expansion to provide the site with cell therapy production capabilities, and potentially someday more cell therapy or gene therapy. So next slide. All right, well, thank you. That concludes the slides we had prepared. I'm going to turn it back to Kathy, who will guide us through the Q&A.
Thank you, Drew. And we're already starting to see questions coming in through the Q&A chat, which I thoroughly appreciate the fact that folks are doing that, or through the Q&A bubbles. Thank you so much. Again, questions need to go in the Q&A bubbles if you want to write your questions. Otherwise, you're welcome to raise your hand to ask a question, and I'll call on you, and you'll be authorized to unmute. And we'll do those verbal questions first. At this time, I'm also going to ask the rest of my colleagues from Bayer who are on the line. So we have a number of technical experts who are with us as well, in case Drew doesn't have all the answers, or Jens wants some support from the scientific staff as well. So I just want to let you know there are more folks who are available to engage in today's meeting. So with that, we're going to get started. We only have one person who's raised their hand so far. So Gloria, I might mispronounce your last name, Colazo. If you would like to go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Okay.
Thank you. We can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. Amazing information. My name is Gloria Colazo again. I'm a board member of St. Jude Children's Hospital. Similar to the growth of our hospital, this expansion project around cell and gene therapy could positively impact the future of treatments of our patients. I was wondering if you could expand on how this facility will benefit patients, particularly those who suffer from very catastrophic diseases, including children, of course. How will the research and development into cell and gene therapies help patients like those treated at our hospital?
Jens, do you want to talk to this topic, please?
Absolutely, and then thank you, Gloria. And you know, this is exactly the kind of thing that we're really passionate about, and that we really want to address, because there's so much unmet medical need. And by the way, I'm a father of twin girls myself, and of course, you know, so this is really crucial for us. And you know, as I alluded to, you know, especially when you look at the gene therapies, right? A lot of the gene therapies address monogenic diseases, and quite a few of those specifically also for children. Because as you can imagine, if a patient has a gene defect, that a protein cannot be made correctly by the body, that then will usually affect the patient or the child from an early age on. And of course, with many diseases, children don't have even a very high life expectancy.
Yes.
Factor VIII, of course, is one example that we talked about, right? And we have a factor VIII gene therapy in development, which then could be used to hopefully cure hemophiliacs. Ultimately, that's the goal. We have therapies in development in early stage, in research and development, on muscular dystrophy, for example. And we also have, for example, a Pompe program, Pompe disease, which, if that works, could affect children in particular. Of course, I mean that's what it's made for. So there are many, and of course, also the cancer therapies.
Yes.
Right. A very good friend of mine, his daughter actually died 2 years ago. Was 11 years old, and very, very big shock, hematological cancer, and basically with current medicine there was nothing that could be done.
Oh
And
my God.
and that is that is really why we're working on these therapies. And I'm hoping, it was in the press recently that we just started a partnership with Atara, also here in the Bay Area, to bring their cell therapy. It's basically allogeneic CAR T cell therapy to treat various different cancers, to really industrialize it. And all of this is very new. So we still develop a lot of the technology and the manufacturing processes, and that's what we will do here in Berkeley. But definitely, we hope that with all these programs, we can help children, not just here, not just in the US, but globally, but from here in Berkeley.
Yes, excellent. I am excited to see that treatments developed from our gene and cell therapy research and their positive impact on patients' care. Every day at St. Jude, we see the benefits of medical innovation and believe that Bayer facility in Berkeley presents an opportunities to develop new treatments for patients that will have a profound impact all over the world. I am really, really pleased. Continued advances in treatments are only possible if companies like Bayer have the laboratories manufacturing space needed to develop these medicines. That's the only way. At St. Jude, it is a research hospital. I can attest for first-hand experience that the product of treatments is allowed to be studied on human subjects without the FDA approval. It must be approved by the FDA. I have absolute confidence that Bayer, with its long history of biotech development, will follow the stringent federal and state safety regulations mandated for a facility like this. We owe it to our patients. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Gloria.
Thank you, Gloria. All right, our next person who is on the list with a question is Liz Exter. And again, if I've mispronounced a name, I apologize. Liz, can you unmute your microphone? And please ask your question.
I actually typed the question in the chat window, or the Q&A window. I'm wondering why you've chosen to design your project with just being PV ready rather than to just go ahead and install the PV modules on your roof. I see you've done a lot with PV on parking structures, but why don't you just do a little bit more and put them on the new building too?
Thanks, Liz. Drew, I'm going to start with you, and then please feel free to direct to any member of the project team that has the appropriate technical expertise.
Sure. And it's an excellent question. So it's a little bit the separation between projects and then site operations, where the power provided to the facility is really by the site. And we have a central utilities organization that is constantly working on how we get power to our different facilities. So like the solar array you see in our parking lot, that's owned by our site organization. The projects edict is to provide the facility, right? So they make sure that it's ready. So that's why we highlighted that, where experience shows that if you're not ready, it can be difficult just to hook up solar panels. Anybody who's done it in their house, I'm surprised, I'll bet they're surprised at how long the electricians are hanging around. So we want to make sure we're ready. And David or Scott Keach, if you're interested to add.
Sure. Yeah. And along those lines, you know, the photovoltaic system is something that we are looking at as part of the project, and we still have to evaluate, to Drew's point, whether there'll be something that will be added later on by Central Utilities or now as part of this project. And really what it kind of comes down to is more of an accounting question. We do intend to use photovoltaics on this building. The current design just hasn't shaken out that detail yet, if that makes any sense. And you know, that is one element of the larger edict that Bayer has as an organization to be carbon neutral by 2030. So this project, as well as other projects that we're working on the site here, as well as around the world, are all following that edict toward a goal of carbon neutrality, and photovoltaics is just one example of a way to do that.
Thanks, David.
Great. So can you fill in a little bit more with other energy efficiency features of your building, if you're allowed to disclose?
So I think the best way to answer that would be that, you know, as you may have guessed by looking at the renderings, we're still in a fairly rudimentary level of design evolution. We're still kind of at a concept phase right now. So we're looking at a number of options, but we know that we're going to be following the LEED process. So LEED, for people who aren't familiar, I think stands for Leadership in Energy Efficient Design, I think. So you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But nevertheless, it's the design process for going for projects in which we evaluate energy performance as well as other sustainable and design features that generally lend themselves toward positive, beneficial use of the facility. So when we look at things like heat recovery, we look at energy recovery, energy modeling. These are all tools that we will use as we go through the design process in order to determine specifically the additional sustainability and energy saving tools that we'll use. And Drew, do you want to add to that at all, or Scott?
Sure, maybe I can just also. So when you look at the different classifications of LEED, it is a reuse site. So there was an adequate facility here that we've removed and we're reusing. We're also located in a very urban area, so our ability to access public transportation and get cars off the road, that's there. Our facility design has the insulation needed to make sure that it's efficient, and our utilities that are in the facility are designed with efficiency in man. Our air handling, which is one of the major consumers of energy of the facilities, are designed to make sure that whatever outside air we need and how we can condition our air is handled up effectively and then evaluated through the LEED energy process. I don't know if you noticed, but there was quite a bit of glass on the facility because we want to make sure that it's a nice environment for our employees. So our indoor environmental quality, those aspects are also all considered as best we can with our process. From a sustainable sites, I highlight a few things where the water retention and pooling, the sustainable plantings and the native plants. So we're really trying to take a holistic view of a facility. We also want to make sure that our infrastructure is as light touch as possible. David mentioned being carbon neutral by 2030. Now that is going to take some offsets, just to be honest. But our mandate as an operating company is to lighten our footprint as much as possible. and to also have as much renewable generation as possible. Now, whether that's purchased through the grid or done on site, we'll make sure we balance that. So it's extremely important to Bear. It's actually extremely important to me. So I appreciate that question very much.
So Drew, maybe just one other thing to add on this is there are guidances out there for the clean room classifications of standard airflows. Over the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a lot more effort put in towards looking at more the performance of the clean rooms versus just hitting the minimum minimum airflow rates. And so that's something we are doing, is we are looking at the performance of the clean room. So we're only pushing the air through that we need to meet the performance, and we're not meeting or focusing on a maximum airflow rate. So we're moving less air. That's another sustainable thing we are definitely looking at in the building.
Thanks, Scott. Just because I did promise we'd do about 15 minutes of the verbal cues, and then we'd get to the questions that are in the chat, and we have a number of questions thrown in the Q&A feature. I'm going to ask the next two folks, just ask your question. We'll try to get to it, but we may not do a follow-on, just so that we can get to all the questions also pending in the written area. So Dana Pearls, welcome back. Please go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Thanks. And I do appreciate your answering the question. We took a lot of time with that first question. So I appreciate your taking the time to answer all of them. I'm pretty concerned about some of the what was shared around the cell therapy and what kind of consultation is happening with bioethics around the globe. At least 75 different countries have explicitly prohibited heritable human genome editing, and it's a pretty slippery slope between cell therapy and germline editing. So I'm wondering, one, if Bayer is going to make an explicit commitment that over the next 30 years of this development agreement that no germline editing will be conducted. I'd also be curious if there will be a firm commitment in writing that there will never be a time that this lab will go over the BSL level 2, so that it won't be a BSL level 3 or 4. And thirdly, I am also interested in knowing what kind of transparency will happen with between Bayer and the city, so that way the city and community can know about the various applications developed over the next 30 years, and it can be run by a third-party independent scientific review board, which would include consultation with bioethics.
So Dana, you asked, I think, 3 questions there.
That's correct.
So I think I'm going to do the short way through this. Drew, clarify for me, I believe our existing DA, which is what this building is under, allows for construction up to BSL 2, correct?
And for the new development agreement.
But I can take this in the meantime. So yeah, BSL2. So just to be very brief, yes, we will stay only to BSL2. I mean, there is absolutely no plan to go to BSL3, and why would we? So we do not intend to work with any pathogens. So therefore, there absolutely no plan, and we wouldn't have any problem committing to that at all. And the same with the germline editing. I don't agree, honestly, with regards to this being a slippery slope. I think it is relatively clearly defined, and germline editing is not something that we would ever plan or contemplate. So, what we are trying to do is, again, in cell therapy is very, very different. Modifying a cell to insert a healthy gene, and then or basically engineering cells to attack cancer cells is completely different and has absolutely nothing to do with germline editing. So in both cases, very clear questions. Very clear answers. It's been a long week. Apologize.
Thank you, Jens. And then just to Drew and Jennifer on our public process for review of buildings. So under the existing DA, which is this building, the one we're talking about today, that's exactly why we're having this meeting now. and why there are community meetings coming up with the city, right, Drew?
Yes, that's right. So this facility we're proposing is a BSL2 production facility, and it's covered under our existing DA, and that DA allows up to BSL2 facilities. So.
Right, but the public process for review that Dana also was asking about our buildings as we build them. So that's why we're having this meeting and the design review, right?
Yep, this is it. So we run through the same public process as a normal facility.
Super. Okay, so we hit those 3 questions. I'm going to go to Anna, and then I'm going to go to the written Q&A. So Anna, if you will go ahead and unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, sorry for the noise of the children in the background. I am a neighbor to this facility. My family and I live just a few blocks away, and appreciate your hosting these meetings, and I went to the Planning Commission meeting as well. My questions are really around something that hasn't come up yet, but is around concerns about any potential environmental impacts around this facility. You know, I'm not as familiar with Bayer's track record around pharmaceuticals, but you talked a lot about this incredible track record around the products that you've produced at that facility. But I am aware that just last year, Bayer faced $650 million settlement with 2,500 communities around the country because of environmental impacts from their facilities in the past. There was another settlement of $265 million last year, again around environmental impacts with some of Bayer products. And while this is a different kind of facility, again, I think these are questions as a community member wondering how can we get a better understanding of what are the potential environmental impacts, particularly in such a environmentally unique location next to the San Francisco Bay, at risk from earthquakes, at risk from sea level rise. I also, curious about any potential air pollutants for, again, our community members. So just curious to understand better about how that review process is happening for this facility and how we in the community can really feel like this is a facility that not just today is one that is safe for our families, but 30 years from now will continue to be so. Again, like you all, I plan to live in this location for the rest of, which will hopefully be many decades from now. So really curious for these questions, and thank you for answering them.
Anna, thank you. Really great to have a neighbor who's engaged in our process. Jens, do you want to start talking about sort of our environmental record on the high level, and then Drew may need to get down into the weeds on the environmental process associated with this building.
Absolutely. I mean, Anna, thank you very much for the question. I mean, of course, I think exactly the same way. We are all part of this community, and so this is absolutely crucial. So thank you for that. Let me just stay on the very high level. I decided to go into biotech really early on in my life, and there were actually 2 reasons for that. One, that I really wanted to do something that helps people, and 2, that I really, really believe in biotechnology, and in large parts because it's a very, very safe and actually environmental friendly technology. So this is not a chemical plant. It's not an oil refinery. It's not comparable to other technologies in that sense. So it's really very environmental friendly because we really work with cells and no toxic substances. When you look at safety also for our operators, the biggest safety risks that we really focus on having under control are things like hot water. I mean, literally hot sterile water, and bleach that we use for the cleaning. So overall, just let me assure you that just fundamentally, the technologies that we use are very environmental friendly. But I hand over to the experts to really talk about the details.
No, thanks, Jens. And I think you characterized it quite well. We are a biotech site. We handle water, and that is upwards of 95% of the material that we use. We also handle buffers and media, which are salts and sugars. Now, like Jens mentioned, the most hazardous stuff we have on site is our cleaning products, but it's also stuff that is fairly readily available in Target. So IPA, bleach, and so on. Our storage facilities for those, as we receive them in bulk, is on our site. It's rated for those hazards, and actually we go above and beyond that. We have retention pond inside that facility that if we ever had a fire, we would retain all the fire water, which, by the way, when we built that, people were wondering why we would do that, but it's so important to us that we protect the environment. Our effluent from site is just standard sewage that goes to East Bay mud. We do have some treatment processes on our manufacturing, which is kind of bio waste. So we do a heat or a pH treatment before we adjustment before we discharge to East Bay mud. Very large water connection. From an air emission standpoint, we have three boilers on site that are permitted and have scrubbers. We have 3 generators on site that are diesel that we run in case of emergency or loss of power, which are also permitted. Beyond that, we have cooling towers, which their main effluent is water vapor. So, you know, again, and I really appreciate these questions. And like Kathy said, it's great to hear from neighbors because they are real concerns. But I have worked in the chemical industry, and I really enjoy biotech. So for all the reasons mentioned.
Thanks, Drew. So we have about 15 questions sitting in the Q&A right now. We have one person who added their hand up right as I was signaling Anna to start, so I'm going to do this one. Jeff Lomax, would you go ahead and unmute your line?
Great, yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for the very informative presentation. From firsthand experience, I've really developed an appreciation of how devastating Alzheimer's and Parkinson's can be. And as we deal with a aging population, these are the types of diseases that are going to affect many more of us. I guess really what was really intriguing was the notion that you're really pursuing approaches that will ideally stop or even reverse disease. And so I guess just quickly, if there's a quick answer, sort of why did you choose those diseases, or why are they sort of predominant in your pipeline, and how do they contrast to existing options that patients might have for stopping or reversing these devastating diseases?
Thank you, Jeff. So Jens and maybe Scott Probst, given your work on the Parkinson project, you might want to weigh in as well.
Yeah, and maybe I can start. Geoff, thank you very much for the question and comments. I only highlighted in terms of why did we select those. I only highlighted really a fraction of our program. We have quite a number of candidates in really various indications. A big part of what we are looking at is usually unmet medical need, right? So that's really big portion. I mean, you want to really go and have the biggest possible impact on human health that you can. A lot of these diseases that we are targeting are devastating, and there are really in many cases there are no good options. And that's really a big reason. That's why I personally went into biotech, and a lot of my colleagues did. So that's definitely a big driver. In some cases, there might be options, but it's still the fundamental. You asked for the difference to other treatments. It's in some cases there are options, but they are still not ideal. They might still mean that we talked about children earlier. The children have to inject themselves on a routine basis, which is a big deal to a child. And so basically trying for something which is sort of the holy grail of medicine, right? That you might inject the child only once. And ideally then this lasts for years or even for a lifetime. So that's what we are shooting for. That's a vision. I can tell you, so that of course it's hard and it's going to take time and continued effort to really get there.
Thank you, Jens. Scott, anything to add on, for example, the Parkinson's program?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Jeff. I'm the product supply product lead for our Parkinson's program. And Parkinson's is a case where the chemical modifications have limited effectiveness. So, and like over time, even patients that respond to levodopa, sometimes that response drops off over time. And then in more advanced Parkinson's, some patients may opt for deep brain stimulation, in which it requires an invasive surgery to implant electrodes to stimulate centers of the brain to produce dopamine, which, you know, it for patients where it works, it's a godsend to them, but it's still not a very high quality of life. And so what we're seeking to do is produce the neurons, also go in surgically, deposit the neurons in the patient's brain, allow them to integrate in the patient's brain, and then produce dopamine on their own and restore the function and provide a much higher quality of life. And so that's what that is our target, and we are building this manufacturing facility so that we could reach a great many patients. So, and offer this treatment. Thank you,
Scott. Okay, I'm going to go over to the written Q&A because I promised I would. And if we have time left, I'll come back for any hands. So, first question comes through from Pam Young. And Pam, thanks for asking your question. I'm going to read it to the group, and I'm going to ask Scott and, well, no, Drew or David perhaps, or Scott, Keach, or David to answer. Pam's very glad to know we plan to use bird-safe glass, but she wants to know if our architect is certified in bird-safe building design, and wants to make sure we're aware that Berkeley has drafted a bird-safe building ordinance in their review process. So, David, Scott, or Drew, are you going to override and take it?
So I can go ahead and take it. So from a high level perspective, exactly whether or not our architect that we are using is a bird safe certified architect or not, I'm unaware. However, we absolutely are already have engaged with a biologist, and now that this question has come up and we know that there is something as a bird safe architect, we have absolutely no issue with reaching out and finding a resource similar to that we can ensure that we're approaching that aspect as well.
Super, thank you. Martin Morehouse, I want to acknowledge your question. You asked about our sustainability goals, so I think Jens and Drew answered that in an earlier question. And you also asked a little bit about what prevents Bear from committing to installing solar PV versus just PV. And I think the second part of that question we may not have completely answered. Scott, can you tackle that? Keach? Or is that a David Wood question, again on the PV?
No, and I think it was touched on a little bit by David prior, but as identified, right, we're looking at the sustainability from a holistic perspective. We want to ensure that we're approaching everything in a systematic manner. As Drew identified, the building is designed to accommodate those the solar panels. We're looking for the right time from an implementation standpoint. Obviously, our primary goal is where and how we get to carbon neutral by 2030. And so as we look at where we invest to hit that, it goes into a holistic investment portfolio to get us to that point. And so that's what we're doing, is we're prepared, and when the right time to invest for that overall sustainability goal, that's how we'll address that item.
Thank you, Scott. And along the lines of utilities, just because we're on energy and power right now, Martin had a second question. And his second question is about the utilities of our central plant, Drew. So do the utilities provided by our central plant include gas-fired equipment? And if so, is there a plan to reduce natural gas at the plant level, complying with the intent that Berkeley natural gas ban would be great, is his point, if we could do it. You're on mute, Drew.
Oof, sorry about that. So to answer the question, so we have 3 gas-fired boilers on site, and we use heating in our process and around in our facilities. Those gas-fired boilers, there isn't necessarily a non-gas-fired replacement for them right now, out of the gate. Now, with that said, and again, the 2030 goal of being carbon neutral is taken very seriously. And we heat things on site and we cool things on site. And the combination of those two offers some benefit to reduce and reuse and capture and contain. So our Central Utilities department has about another 12 months to understand what our cooling refrigeration capacity is on site, or our needs long term, what our heating needs are on site, and what is the intersection of those two, and how can we reduce gas consumption. Because the point's well taken. You got 3 large gas boilers on site, and you're trying to be carbon neutral, and those two compete. So we understand, and we're working on it. We also have to balance that, though, with surety of supply for our patients. So it will be a wheel that turns. How fast is to be determined.
Thank you. And so just continuing on the energy topic for a moment, Dana Pearls asked a follow-on question, which is, what is the full energy consumption Bear will use with this facility? So just this facility, again, because this is the topic of the meeting. And Drew, I don't know if that's you or if that's David or Scott.
That's a pretty detailed question, but does anybody remember what the amp hookup is on it?
We're going to come back to that one.
I think maybe we can. I mean, it's an interesting question. I will say that our launch infrastructure that we're building, and this is part of, is significantly less energy intensive than a standard plant. Just though the process technology that we use requires significantly less, and as Scott mentioned, we are getting much better on how we manage our clean spaces, so we use far less energy. So it will be very as efficient as we can make it. The actual amp draw, we have to get back to you on.
Great, thanks, Drew. We can do that. We can follow up with her. Okay, Karen Rocard, and Karen, I'm going to apologize right up front if I mispronounced your name. She's asked a few questions. I'm going to work my way through them. So the first one is, what are the risks of the waste products from this facility getting into the water or other systems the general public uses? Drew, do you want to talk about our waste management? You're muted.
The collective genius lost on a mute button is staggering. Sorry, everybody. So we have a few topics. One is just we have facilities on site that flush toilets and so on and so forth. So that's just like our neighbors. We have manufacturing facilities that have bioreactors and create cell mats that we neutralize through a pH adjustment process, and that is standard sanitary waste. We also have storm drains on site, and we've done quite a bit of work on site recently. So we used to have 4 effluents. I think we have 3 now. In any case, each of those effluent tie points have a valve on them. So if we have a spill of something we want to keep out of, that needs to be kept out of the storm sewer system that flows into the bay, we have our ability to isolate that and then can contain it. So hope that answers the question.
And Drew, all of our procedures for material handling comply with the local, state, and federal guidelines, correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I always take that for granted. And even further, our dumpsters are covered, like all of the standard stuff to make sure that our waste is contained happen. We take that very serious.
Awesome, thank you. So Kieran also just has a general question, Drew. So just keep your mic open. About just what are the risks in general of adding this building to the Berkeley site? Are there any significant risks that are outside of what we have today?
No. As a matter of fact, there are none. When you see me confused, I'm thinking because I want to have a point to talk about. But this one's no. There's not. The way we can construct the facilities is the compliance. So even the construction, we will recycle all of our construction debris. We're using an existing site. The operations that will go on inside it are BSL2, so we make sure that all the safety precautions are there from a filtration and a containment standpoint, and all waste is handled appropriately. So,
and in terms of environmental impact, we have a CEQA supplemental, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Thank you for calling me back to this. So yeah. So every building that is built goes through California Environmental Quality Act review. This facility is being reviewed as a supplement to the large one we did as part of the DA. So we check this facility against that and make sure it all complies, and that's part of the city approval process. So
thanks, Drew. Okay, Jens, I'm back over to you. Karen's last question in the chat that I've found, or in the Q&A chat, is one about jobs. Will Berkeley residents have any priority in jobs, and she adds, or treatments, or clinical trials?
That is a tough question. I mean, I have to say not per se, right? But it's also obvious that we are recruiting, of course, from people out of the community, applying for jobs. I mean, many people working at the site live either in Berkeley or in the surrounding communities. So of course we are hiring locally. For some more specialized jobs, we are hiring from all over the United States, and in some special cases, perhaps even globally. When you talk about very specific expertise that you try to get together, but we are of course a site and a facility as a not only development and scientific facility, but really a manufacturing facility, right? And we are talking here about bringing more manufacturing capacity, even though very, very specialized manufacturing capacity to Berkeley. And that does mean more jobs. And because it's also manufacturing, there's a whole range of jobs. I mean, it really has the whole gamut. And so, are we, or can we even legally restrict it to just people from the immediate environment? No, we can't. But of course, we hire substantially from the surrounding community. Priority with regards to clinical trials and so on, same thing. I don't think we could legally do that. And I'm sure you will agree that what we try to do is we try to really, I mean, our motto as a company is actually health for all and hunger for none. And I mean, we really believe in that. And so, as I said earlier, we are supplying our current drugs into 50 different countries worldwide. But of course, you can have access here locally as well as globally. For clinical trials, by the way, there are ways, and we could follow up. I'm not sure exactly the web pages, but there are registries where you can register online and apply for participating in clinical trials, which is of course open to everyone in the community as well.
Thanks, Jens. And I just want to add, for those of you not familiar with it, one of the big things that came about from the original development agreement with the City of Berkeley was the formation of Biotech Partners, which is a STEM education program that provides workplace training And we've been very fortunate to have a number of folks who graduated from the Biotech Partners Program, which is Berkeley High and some of the local community colleges, and have them on our staff today. So I just want to say that while we can't specially say we will only hire people in Berkeley, because that's hard to do, we do offer programs that help folks in Berkeley, and particularly Berkeley youth, move into biotech if they'd like to. So next question is about energy again. We have a lot of energy questions today, gentlemen. And I say gentlemen because all of the guys are handling all of the building questions. So Scott and Drew and David, I'm going to let you pick. Lab buildings are very energy intensive. You mentioned LEED certification. So David, you started this question off. But at what level is our LEED certification application going to be? And again, more questions just around solar panels. And are you taking advantage of power generation or any other active green features? So Scott and David.
So good question. So LEED certification. So we are targeting at a minimum LEED silver. We see that it is within our grasp probably to be able to achieve LEED gold. As you may know, in the LEED process, there are certain credits that are available and certain credits that might not be available based on the project characteristics. So I think Drew mentioned a little bit earlier on, there are credits that are available for, things like proximity to public transportation or reuse of an existing site. And, in our case, we are fortunate to be able to take advantage of those credits. But, there's only so many that our particular project might be, that we might have at our disposal, so to speak. So we see that it's a realistic target for us to achieve gold, but silver is our baseline target. And again, it depends on how the process goes throughout the entire project and which credits actually get approved when we finally submit the project for certification.
Oh, David, and I think I also think it's fair to say that the LEED program, as it was developed, was really developed and targeted around office buildings, is what it was first developed and targeted around. Then it moved into labs and manufacturing buildings. The certification around manufacturing buildings, the nature of the building itself is much different, and it's much more difficult to hit those higher targets. And so we will be silver. We are looking at and seeing if we're going to be able to reach gold. If we can reach gold, we will.
Yep, absolutely.
And the only thing I would like to add is compliance with the California Energy Code basically gets us silver. So as the person who has to maintain the facility after our project team is done, I'm always pushing on these guys to be better because it makes my life a little easier. We do have to also balance that with capital demands for the organization. So
yeah.
Awesome. So let's move on because we still have about 13 questions left and I'm cognizant of people's time. So Drew, I'm going to throw this question at you and it's the one from Aaron Deem. And Aaron, I apologize if I mispronounced your name. How much noise will the building emit, for example, from exhaust fans? What are the expected decibel levels? I don't know if we have that specifically, but maybe it ties to what we do today on the site.
So it's about 36, which means you won't be able to hear it. It'll be negligible. It won't change the environment at the gate at all.
Great. And while you're live, and then I'm going to say to Jennifer, if you want to chime in, please do. Gordon Wozniak is asking if you could just briefly describe our existing 30-year agreement with the City of Berkeley. What is the development agreement that we have?
Jennifer. I can describe it too, but I've been doing a whole lot of talking. Go ahead.
All right, I guess I'm on. So the development agreement is a legally binding contract between the City of Berkeley and Bear. What it does is freeze in time the land use regulations at the moment that the agreement was signed, and that was 1992. It also lays out what their plans to do, what their plan to do back in 1992. So there's an overarching vision of what we're going to build and how it's going to work. And in exchange for that clarity and surety, a regulatory environment that's stable, Bear pays community benefits. And one of those community benefits was already mentioned tonight. That was the Biotech Partners, which brings 15 high school students onto our campus when people can come onto our campus for paid internships every year, and numerous other community benefits as well. That's the other large project that we're working on to extend that agreement. And as soon as we have another public meeting, Gordon, I would love to have you join another one. Gordon is a former council member and a very wise man.
Yeah, and I'll just add this, that it's a nice opportunity to holistically view what development Bear foresees to support its patients over the course of a long period, and review that holistically from an environmental and a general impact standpoint. It also allows the community to consider what the long-term needs they have over that same period, and we can have that discussion at once. And going through the extension, I know we're not talking about that today. It is feel the gravity of it for sure, but it is a healthy discussion, and I've enjoyed it.
Thanks, Drew. And along that same topic, we did have an anonymous attendee ask about what transparency Bear will have with the city on the next 30 years. And again, I think we're going to table topics about the DA extension for today. But please watch for another meeting where we are going to talk about the DA extension again. Now, back to this Cell and Gene Therapy Production Center. Aaron had a second question about bird-safe glass. So David and Scott, are you ready? So there's an appreciation about the bird-safe glass, but given the aquatic park as a stopover to on the Pacific Flyway, can you extend the bird-safe glass to all windows on the building? And then Aaron's also asking about the planting palette. Are all the plants regionally native? And could you give any examples of specific insect bird species that will be supported and coordinated with the California Native Plant Society, the Golden Gate Audubon, the Xerces Society, to ensure that the palette maximally supports declining insects and birds?
Yeah. So this is a really important question, right? And I'm just going to click back so I can read through it as I'm answering. A really important question, and it's multiple questions. So I think first to talk about the bird-safe glass, and I'll preface this by saying that I am not an expert in this by any stretch. As we mentioned earlier, we have engaged some experts in the project team, so certainly we'll defer to them as we go through the design process. Excuse me. My understanding of the way bird-safe glass works is that essentially it reduces the reflectivity of the glass. The major risk being that birds, if it's reflective, will see trees and think that they're flying into a wooded area, flying toward the trees, and hit the glass instead, and that can be, you know, dangerous and fatal to the birds. So by reducing the reflectivity of the glass, the trees don't appear visible, and so the birds try to fly around them, or wouldn't try to fly into the glass. That's my understanding of it. And if that's the case, which of course will be confirmed as we go through the process, you know, we would need to examine whether it makes sense to actually put bird-safe glass on the sides of the building that don't have trees that wouldn't reflect, right? So there's another building to the south, and the reflection in that window might be the building and not glass. But regardless, I think that's a nuance. The point is that, you know, by engaging our experts, in the design process, we'll make sure that we have adequate coverage on the windows where it makes sense. In terms of specific species, again, I can't speak to that. We'd have to follow up.
Yeah, and
that information.
Yeah, and David, I think we should take that question as input to our design, especially on the plantings. That way we answer all the questions at once: native plants, native birds, native bugs.
Yeah.
So.
But again, the short answer is, yeah, I mean, the intent is that whatever we put in will be, intended to support to a reasonable extent the native birds and insects and everything else in the environment. I mean, we want this facility to be as harmonious as it can be. So we're certainly will intend to do that. But as I said, I don't know the specifics of species off the top of my head right now. And I think we haven't gotten to that point yet in design, but certainly this is something we'll carry with us. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, the next one I can answer. It's from Adolfo. He's asking how many people from the community are attending this Zoom meeting now. Adolfo, I can tell you that there are 50 people who are not from Bear who are in the community meeting right now. Next question, and Drew, I'm sending it to you because I really don't quite personally understand the question completely. And it's from an anonymous attendee, and it's about water quality. Will Bear publish water quality data to be publicly accessible? What is the process and oversight of handling bio-waste?
So I'll have to follow up, but I believe all of our effluent data is public already. Most of the water we hand on site, we run through purification processes to make it water for injection, which is basically just pure water. There's nothing in it. We use that in our process to grow our cells, and also through our purification. We also use it in our final formulation, excuse me. All of the process treatment we have on site, again, it's either a pH adjustment or we have some heat treatment as well. And then it fits the standard East Bay mud sanitary standards. So maybe we can follow up a bit about where those testing results are posted. Because again, we're a industrial site that is regulated by the EPA and other agencies. So.
Thanks, Drew. So if the person who asked that question anonymously can follow up with Jennifer or I at Berkeley Communications, Berkeley.communications@bear.com.
I think it's communications.berkeley.
Thank you, Jennifer. Communications.berkeley@bear.com, and we'll make sure we can get that answer back to you. I'm going to throw a question over to Lisa Reagan because, you know, we haven't shown Lisa on camera yet, and she should get her moment in the sun. But it's also because she's leading our biologics development group. So Lisa, here's the question, and it's from another anonymous attendee. Does Bear follow the EPA's guidelines on least risky organisms in its microorganism registry? There's always a community concern about the agents and materials used in the lab. Oh, Lisa is deferring to Jens.
Sure, and I'm happy to address this, and actually maybe bundle it together with a couple of other questions that I'm just seeing in the Q&A, all related to safety and concerns with regards to modified organisms, perhaps escaping the facility and so on. So let me maybe first start with one really important thing. We are not working on any dangerous pathogens. We are not working on pathogens. That's not what we do. So we really work with, not even with microorganisms that could potentially survive in the wild. We are actually working with usually mammalian or human cells, which are, you know, very hard to keep alive, because these cells are actually, you know, used to living in or designed to live inside an organism. So when we think about, for example, regenerative cell therapy, it's basically growing cells that you would transplant, like growing heart cells that you would transplant back into a human body. You cannot keep those alive. It's very hard to do. It's like, you know, having a heart transplant, and which also cannot escape from the lab, so to speak. But beyond that, not working on any pathogens, we have extensive barriers, of course, extensive clean room technologies, HVAC systems that are filtering the air many, many, many times over. And so basically, there are extensive barriers that would prevent anything from coming in and from coming out. So from that perspective, I can assure you that there are no safety concerns, certainly for the community.
Thank you, Jens. Okay, so all of the anonymous questions, I think then around items escaping from the labs have, I think, been addressed by that answer. So next question is from Renee Borg. Scott or David, who is our architect?
So Floor is the engineer for the shell of the building, the engineer and architect for the shell of the building.
And for the interiors, there's another architecture and engineering company who's working in partnership with Floor called PM Group. And so between those two work streams, we have actually 3 or 4 different licensed architects on the team.
And for everybody who wants to know, Floor is spelled F-L-U-O-R, so like flower, yes, but with the verbs switch, with the vowels switched. Sorry.
And just in case they're listening, it's Floor.
Floor, yeah.
Yeah.
But not Floor like French. So we always make it interesting. Moving right along. Drew, Susan Renaud, what about bleach waste, since you've been handling the water questions?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, it's part of our cleaning regimens and also handled as part of our general waste stream. If the concentration is high, we pack it out. So we have an environmental contractor who comes and removes containers if the concentration is such. If we're using it to mop floors and things like that, where it's generally where it is considered sanitary waste, it'd be handled just like you do at home. But again, the concentration high enough, we pack it out and get shipped off site.
Thank you. There's a question from Ben Garcia. With the new facility, do we see any changes or improvements in nighttime light pollution? Drew, yeah. Is this a David question?
I can take it. I mean, the short answer is no. They're actually, we talked earlier about LEED, and there is a LEED credit that will be going for regarding light pollution. So the exterior lighting, there won't be any big uplights or spotlights on the outside of the building. All we're going to have is street lights, that we currently have along the street that we're taking out so that we can build the project, but we'll put them in at the end. And so at the end of the day, at the end of the project, the amount of light pollution should be the same as it is now, and actually probably will be better because the luminaires that we'll put in will be more focused and more energy efficient LEDs, so it should actually be improved.
Great.
Yeah, well said.
Question from Brennan Cox. Has the landscape architect been hired for the project? David?
Yes, the answer is yes. It's part of the team working under Floor, but yes, we do have a landscape architect.
Okay, then Brennan also asked a question about the 7th Street Plaza, so the new public plaza. Again, that's part of our master plan and DA extension. So Brennan, I hope you join us for another community meeting. We're trying to keep this focused on the one building project and not allow scope creep here today. So, but yes, there is a 7th Street Plaza that's planned in that project. There's another question about the DA, which talks about what types of genetic technologies, DNA technologies we can use, and asks about carrying these over into the next DA. Again, I encourage this anonymous attendee to attend our next meeting, where we'll be probably talking about the DA extension and the master plan again. And those topics can definitely be covered. But I know that folks came today for the discussion on this new building, and we're running close on time. I think our last question in the written questions is from Gordon Wozniak, and he's asked for a little bit more information about the intern training program that residents of Berkeley participate in. So Jens or Jennifer, do you want to talk about Biotech Partners?
Maybe just very briefly on the high level, and then let Jennifer talk a bit more about the details. But this is something. Thank you for the question. It's something very close to my heart. It's something where I actually worked. I've been in the Bay Area for 20 years now, and I started with Bayer in January 2000. So early in my career, I worked myself very closely with Biotech Partners. Basically mentored several interns over the years here from Berkeley and the neighborhoods, and several of which are now working at the Bayer site. So it's something I'm very passionate about. It's something that actually we not only want to continue, but also think about expanding further. But Jennifer, maybe you can talk a little bit more about the details.
One of the things that I'm really excited about the Biotech Partners program in Berkeley is that program leadership has done a tremendous job making sure that the program is accessible to low-income residents of Berkeley and young people of color. These are generally the first person in their family to go to college. Every year, our annual report includes information about the demographic breakdown of the students, and they're consistently exactly what you would hope to see, of making sure that a new generation has access to great STEM education. And then the only thing I would add is that some of our key leaders, we have an associate director, Lauren Rollins, who grew up in the neighborhood, drove past the Bayer site when she was a kid on her bicycle, and now is associate director in our manufacturing operations. Our other CCTC building that's currently under construction, and a key player on that team is Sarmed Anwar, who is another Biotech Partner graduate. So Bayer has really benefited from the brilliance of our neighbors here, and we're looking forward to continuing that. And just a little side note, for those of you who are listening, I understand that Biotech Partners is conducting a survey of their graduates. So keep an eye out. If you are a graduate of the Biotech Partners program, reach out to me. I know they're interested in interviewing former graduates.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, I see no other questions in the Q&A, and we are only 2 minutes over our promised time. So with that, I'd like to ask Jens if he'd like to close the meeting with any comments.
Absolutely, Cassie. So first of all, let me thank here our panelists. I know it's been a long week for you, and so appreciate and especially appreciate all of you out there who joined us here tonight. So we've been a part of this community for decades now, and we want to be really a valuable part of this community for many decades to come. And that's why we also work on the DA. And we want to really, from here, bring medicines and new revolutionary therapies to people all over the world. So, what we also want to do, though, is we want to hear from you. And that's what these meetings are about, and get your input and your feedback on what we can do better, and also address concerns that you may have. So I always enjoy really these discussions. We had several community meetings on various topics already, and we will continue these going forward. So thanks for your time, thanks for your questions and comments, and I really hope this has been valuable to you too.
Thank you, Jens. Goodbye, everyone. This concludes our meeting.